afternoon, everybody. Happy Thursday. It's a different day for the press conference today, so that's why we're live on a Thursday. Norwich City back in action this weekend. I hope everyone's got their bucket and spades at the ready for the long trip to the seaside and Blackpool on Saturday afternoon. Adam Harvey, joined by Connor Southwell. For this preview show, we want all your comments, so get them down in the comment section below, and we'll try and get round to those towards the end of the show. Connor, to start off, before we talk football, have you found the international break? I mean, it's a sort of spell where, I'll be honest, I don't really enjoy these kind of breaks. It's sort of glamorised friendlies. I maybe what you'd label a fair weather England fan. I enjoy the buzz around tournaments. I'll get in the pub and get behind the boys. But these sort of moments in international football aren't really for me. So what have you made of it? But by the same token, it gives us an opportunity to spend a bit more time at home with our families. And I believe you sort of got a break in with your son during the sort of break we've just had.
Yeah, I did. It was nice from that perspective. I'm like you. I think I've watched one game over the international break, and that was England Germany, and even that was slightly underwhelming, wasn't it? Until obviously it went a bit mad towards the end, which was good. It kind of woke me up a little bit, but it's been weird because usually I sit in international breaks. I'm really yearning for football to come back, and I haven't quite had that feeling this time. And I'm trying to really and this is what just kind of spoil what I'm writing about for my column on Saturday. It's kind of about around that and why there's this feeling, even though Norwich City are doing quite well and going quite well in the Championship, why there's this flatness around, which maybe some people don't feel, but there's certainly people who do. So I found it quite an interesting international break because it doesn't really feel like Norwich are where they are, or the results have been what they are. But it's been nice to just kind of switch off, reflect on stuff other than football. I've actually, basically said goodbye to the family for the month of October because the amount of games that we're cramming in means that we're pretty much not going to see anyone, I don't think, beyond Dean Smith and each other. So, no, it's going to be good. It's been a good couple of weeks off. And, we'll reassemble at Blackpool on Saturday and let's see what we get.
Yeah, fairly positive updates in sort of partial team news this morning. I'll just reflect on the more positive ones initially. Liam Gibbs expected to be back in training today. Smith kind of saying that he's a man that he's going to assess and hopefully he'll be available, but it just depends on how he gets on. But I think Yanulis as well, also potentially one who looks like he might be back sort of middle of October, a position that Norwich have really struggled in terms of left backs with all the injuries they've had. So that's very positive. But I just wanted to hone in on the central defence. We kind of had that news at the start of the international break that Grant Hanley and Andrew Omobamidele had both withdrawn from the international squads, Scotland and Ireland respectively. So good news on those fronts. Dean Smith saying they're both going to be in training today. So how positive is that, Connor? But also, what have you made of them as a central defensive partnership so far this season? I mean, on Andrew Omobamidele obviously suffered so badly with his injuries last season, but we kind of forget how young a man he is. So what have you made of his performances alongside Grant Hanley, sort of the more experienced pro so far this season, and sort of the development of their partnership?
Yeah, I mean, first half of the question, it's really good news. I think everyone probably looked at their withdrawal from an international setup and probably felt slightly concerned about it because the partnership has been pretty solid. And for all the kind of bits of Norwich City's team that we've maybe picked up and taken and put it under the microscope and kind of dissected why things maybe are clicking or aren't clicking, we haven't really had to do that with the central defensive partnership. I think people are looking at that as quite settled, quite solid. It's something that Norwich City probably haven't had for a while, even in perhaps past Championship title wins. They obviously had the Hanley and Gibson partnership 2 years ago, but in the 18-19, I'm trying to get my years right, there was a bit more chopping and changing. You had Godfrey, Hanley, Zimmerman, Closer, kind of all being involved. Whereas this time, it feels like if those two stay fit, that's going to be Norwich City's partnership from here until May. And that is something that I think provides people with a great deal of comfort. And actually, I took from Dean Smith's words today, the fact they were back in training, the fact that they have been nursing them slowly and almost wrapping them in cotton wool a little bit, that they probably would be fit enough for Saturday, which is really encouraging. And as a partnership, I think it's probably the one thing I looked at and felt that Norwich City needed to do a little bit better, to be honest, because you look at the amount of goals that they shipped, not just in the Premier League, but also during title-winning campaigns. And Daniel Farke put it quite well, really, in terms of, and he said this before, if a newly promoted team that goes up and concedes less goals, fewer goals than their opponents, they tend to have a better chance of staying in the Premier League. The statistics show that. So I think that's probably the one area of Norwich's game that has been solid and hasn't really been questioned, and we haven't really had to put under the microscope. And you look at that three now of Krul, Hanley, and Omar, they don't really concede a lot of real quality chances, but when they do, they often defend them quite well. So, it's really encouraging, and it's also really good to see this partnership blossom, because you've got obviously an experienced head, Grant Hanley, who, in terms of pure defensive, basic defending, heading, tackling, blocking, positioning, whatever, I think he's the best in the Championship at all of those. And then you've got Omar, who could become easily the best in the Championship over time. People forget his age. People also forget the lack of minutes that he's played. It feels like he's been around for a long time, but hasn't played too much football, really blossoming. Kind of the world is his oyster, I think, in terms of football. He's got the physique, the size, he can pass, he can play. It's been a little bit Virgil van Dijk at times. Virgil van Dijk of previous seasons, perhaps, rather than this one, where it's almost looked a little bit too easy for him at times. I think it's navigating those as well and ensuring there's not a complacency, and that's probably why it's so important to have Grant Hanley alongside him. But I look at that actually, and there's not very many areas of the team I've done this so far, but I look at that partnership, and could that partnership exist in the Premier League, thrive in the Premier League with the right structures around it, which is the big caveat? I think it probably could, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the questions surrounding sort of the slightly worse news in regards to Isaac Hayden, a man that Smith, before the international break, said he was expecting him to be back in training, get potentially an opportunity as well with the under-23s. We know that they played Wycombe earlier in the week, and I think a lot of fans probably expected that Isaac Hayden was playing in that game, because we didn't really get a team news update on that one. But Smith this morning saying it's not really great news. Again, he went up to Newcastle during the break, an effusion, which is sort of water surrounding his knee, out for another...
Not infusion. Effusion. Don't do what I did.
Out for another sort of 10 days, 2 weeks sort of period before he gets back into team training. But how big a blow is that mentally for Isaac Hayden, Connor? We know that when he sort of arrived, he had this sort of few injury issues, and we heard sort of off the record that he was a man that felt really gutted, and he felt like he'd let the team down for coming on this sort of journey with Norwich and suffering an injury so early. So to then have to now sort of sustain another 2 week period out, where we feel like sort of potentially by the time we actually see him in action, it could be even after the World Cup break, by the time he gets himself back into training and back up to speed. So mentally, how big a blow is that for him, but also for Norwich? They've kind of been yearning for this defensive midfielder now for quite a while. It feels like he's maybe the man that sort of that Championship Premier League experience they maybe needed last season in that midfield position. So to not have him for the whole of this season so far, and now sort of another month or so, how big a blow is that?
So it's a big blow for everyone. It's a blow for Isaac Hayden, first and foremost. It's going to be, I think you're right, I think it's probably at this stage looking difficult to foresee a situation where we see Isaac Hayden before the World Cup break now. I think just because of the volume of games, the sheer amount of games, the time that he's going to need. I always felt it was a stick, and maybe at conflict with kind of what we've heard privately. I think there probably was a stage where they when the market was open, where they would have explored the possibility of even signing a replacement in that position if one would have presented itself. So I think it's always been a little bit of a concern that this could happen. Obviously, and it's worth noting at this point, Norwich City didn't sign him with an injury. He got injured in his first week of training. Obviously, he's had this long-term injury. That's the bit that you can maybe question, not the fact that he's injured now. And people, and I've seen this used quite a lot today as well. It's how did he pass a medical? How did that happen? I think people think of medicals as people going up and down the body and kind of going, yep, that works. He's not injured there. But actually, you can pass a medical with an injury. You can fail a medical without being injured. What it is essentially is a risk assessment. Because we use this term medical, I think people maybe perceive it in a certain way, but essentially they look at different areas of the body and they assess how much of a risk it is compared to what the club's willing to pay, and then they offer advice to that club. So again, the advice could have been different to what the actual final decision was. We of course don't know that, and I'm not insinuating that was the case, but actually you look at Isaac Hayden's career, he hasn't had a huge amount of injuries. He hasn't had reoccurring injuries before. This is the first time really in his career that he's had a real long-term injury, and it just happens to be at a time where he's obviously moved clubs and signed for Norwich City, and there's obviously, as you said, that that need for maybe a bit more of a conventional number 6 that Norwich City have lacked, and their midfielders lack balance as a result of that. So yeah, I feel for him first and foremost, because as you said there, he's been absolutely gutted. I think that he's not been involved, and it must be difficult because you come into a new club. There's expectations around you automatically, not just among supporters, also among teammates and staff, and navigating that can be quite difficult anyway. But then when you have to do it, having been sidelined for a few months, not being involved in pre-season, not really kicked a ball, that must feel pretty tough on him and pretty grueling on him first and foremost. So I hope that there are the structures and people in place, I'm sure there are, to look after him and facilitate those conversations that he needs, should he need them. From Norwich City's perspective, it's really frustrating. It's a massive blow because you look at their midfield at the moment and as I said, it's not balanced. There's not a natural balance to it. That it isn't something that is functional in the way that perhaps they would have liked or they would have foreseen with Isaac Hayden in there. He brings a very specific set of skills that they don't have, that they've probably been looking for, not just this summer, but also for a few summers as well, maybe specifically last season when, of course, we had sort of life after Alex Tettey, which is something they've not really encountered in the last decade or so. So it's frustrating on that part, frustrating for Dean Smith because he put so much work into getting Isaac Hayden in the first place. And the deal, again, I think it's been reported this week, but it's pretty favourable in terms of Norwich City's favour wage-wise. But as a financial investment, obviously you look at it and you take the human elements of it. And at this moment in time, it doesn't look like a great investment. Nobody's fault. It's just the way it's happened. So, yeah, it's a frustrating one and it's a difficult one. I personally think Norwich will stick with it because ultimately, if they get Isaac Hayden fit and they get him in a position where he can play games, he is going to probably be, and again, we have to caveat with the fact that he's probably not going to have kicked a ball in a year. So we don't really know what Isaac Hayden's going to come back. There's always an element of risk with that. But if they do get him back to the player we saw at Newcastle, he's probably much better than they would be able to attract anyway. So that's why I think they'll persist with it. Obviously, in terms of the permanent option that is there, that is based on a number of, we believe anyway, a number of games. He has to play a certain amount of games and Norwich City to be promoted for it to become an obligation rather than an option. So they've got a bit of flexibility in and around that. And of course, he could still play 20 games, even if he comes back after the World Cup break. So there's plenty of football still to be played, but it's a major blow, I think, for all parties and supporters as well, which is probably the one facet that I didn't cover in that, because he was the headline signing, wasn't he? The poster boy, the first one, really. And was kind of the one that made people sit back and go, okay, yep, they're keen to turn the page. They've identified an area of the pitch that needs improvement and they're getting on with it. And of course, we haven't seen him yet kick a ball in anger, which is a real shame, I think, for everyone involved. So frustration, probably the overriding emotion for everybody, I would say. I'm not particularly surprised, I must say. And it's a little bit of a shame that we're here. But for Norwich City and Dean Smith now, it's about finding a way. You've got 8 games in October. That's a hell of a lot of games. And they're going to have to utilise their squad in getting players back from injury. And I'm sure we'll mention Liam Gibbs. The fact that he's on the cusp of returning may well bail them out, actually, in this situation.
Yeah, sort of just staying on that theme. I mean, I just looked at his stats: 118 games in the Premier League and 51 in the Championship. You know, he's sort of the sort of operator that you feel like, even if it had got a move to sort of a Bournemouth or a Nottingham Forest in the Premier League sort of this summer, you feel like he probably could have done a good job there. So the fact that Norwich went out and got him was impressive in the initial signing. But I can understand the sort of the fans' frustrations that he's not played, and ultimately Norwich haven't really got a defensive midfielder in his mould that's quite athletic to sort of fit the bill while we wait for his return. I'm just staying on that, Connor. David on Facebook just asking that he maybe feels it's time to move on from Hayden, but should Norwich look at sort of defensive midfield alternatives in January, I suppose is what he means there. You kind of stated that Norwich were looking at that potentially in the summer. So is that something you feel that maybe come January, if Isaac Hayden's still not featured in a yellow and green shirt, that's somewhere they've got to look?
Absolutely. Yeah, I could foresee that as a situation. Obviously, all sides have to be willing for a loan to be kind of cut back, and whether Newcastle, who at this moment in time have another club paying a portion of Isaac Hayden's wages, would be happy in that scenario. To have him back on his full wages at that point is probably a different matter. Maybe they have the money that it's an irrelevance either way. Who knows? It's a question rather than me saying anything with complete certainty. But yeah, I think if we were in this position come January, Norwich would need to dip into the market. They would have to, because I think it's a position that we've seen really struggle with. Kenny McLean's played there probably slightly out of position at times. They've played a bit more of a 2 with Nunez and McLean in there, which ultimately wasn't Dean Smith's plan this season. He wanted to play a 4-3-3. He wanted to have a natural number 6 in front of them. He wanted we spoke about that solid 3. He wanted a solid 4 really, with Krul, Hanley, Omobamidele and Hayden being almost like that diamond down the centre part of the pitch. And in terms of the Championship, you look at that as a foursome. There's no better, in my opinion, at this level in terms of experience, quality, and obviously of Omobamidele potential as well. So I think they would. What that would look like and how it would materialise is probably a different conversation for another day. But the way I foresee it now is the ball is firmly in Liam Gibbs's court, because it's a position that he came into and at a very tender age looked very, very, very talented in, and very capable in. And actually, the times that we have seen Norwich City click as a midfield unit have been with Liam Gibbs kind of sitting at the base of that midfield. So let's see what he's like. Hopefully, with a prolonged run of games now that he's back, and it's a massive boost for Norwich City, the fact he's back, and it's a testament to Liam Gibbs and the work that he's putting in, that we were even mentioning him in this conversation, which we wouldn't have done if it was 4 months ago, for example. So I would say if this is the situation come January and Hayden is still out, will they assess the loan? I would imagine they probably will. Would they look to sign someone else? Yes. Could Liam Gibbs also make both of those elements redundant? I think he probably could if he performs well. So I think it's probably a bit wait and see at the moment. But the fact they were looking potentially at the summer would also suggest that they would they'd be keen to reopen that if the situation was as was in January, which hopefully it won't be.
Before we talk more Norwich City, I just want to flip the chat to this weekend's opponents, Blackpool. I had a really good 30-minute chat with Lee Charles yesterday on Terrace Talk, which if anyone's on the Pink and Plus, go and watch that. That was a really insightful chat. And he kind of spoke about the decade that Blackpool have endured. You know, they've been on a roller coaster ride. Quite ironic we're talking about roller coasters and Blackpool, but they obviously were in the Premier League in 2010, 2011. They then had sort of a period where they only had 8 players on the books in 2014. They had a spell where they all boycotted home games for around about 4 or 5 seasons, and they dipped down to League Two. There's now back into the Championship and sort of trying to establish themselves back there. He felt that they just need to, maintain their Championship status this season, and that's a successful season for Blackpool. So what are your thoughts, Connor, on Blackpool so far this season? 3 wins, 2 draws, 5 defeats. Fairly solid start for a side that's, lost their arguably best player in Josh Bowler as well in the summer on deadline day to Nottingham Forest, to only go and loan him out to Greece team Olympiacos straight away. So a big sort of loss there for them. So what have you made of them from afar? And Norwich obviously not been there since 2014. So you're excited to visit Blackpool?
I am excited to visit Blackpool. It's going to be the first time I've ever been to either Blackpool or Bloomfield Road, so that's going to be an experience. I think I'm probably a bit gutted that we're going in October and not in August, but as is the case. You mentioned Josh Bowler. They also lost Neil Crickley, of course, in the summer, who did a pretty remarkable job there in the circumstances. Kind of picked them up post takeover, post Oyster era, and has managed to do an excellent job. And actually they were pretty upwardly mobile, and obviously departs to become Stephen Gerrard's assistant, and it's down to Michael Appleton again, who is a coach that I really rate and have really rated for a long time. Obviously the Lincoln job was a little bit difficult, and probably following the Cowleys didn't go the way he would have liked, but more than capable of coaching at this level. So I think they've been a bit erratic. I think that's probably a nature of what they're like. But ultimately, the aim, as you said there, is consolidation. I think after last season was their first season back in the Championship, wasn't it? So it's avoiding the struggle that a second season can often become, I think. And Norwich will have to be prepared, I think, for what will be a very aggressive, front foot, in your face, press high sort of game against a Blackpool team who will have the fans right behind them. And I think that kind of atmosphere is one, and we saw it kind of to a degree at Hull earlier on in the season. Norwich have struggled in the past. So, it's going to be interesting. I spoke to Sonny Carey yesterday, who's used to be on the books at Norwich City Academy, former Kings Lynn player, also played at Wroxham and Norwich United, now at Blackpool. It's a great story. You can read that on the Pink and Plus. And asked him kind of that question, what can Norwich expect? And he said, they will hate coming to Bloomfield Road to play us. So that's kind of an insight into maybe what they are and what they will offer. But yeah, it's been a mixed start, hasn't it, really? And that was probably to be expected. So look, they will be viewing Norwich as a really good test for where they are at this moment in time. And of course, as a major scalp if they could get a victory. So the onus will be on Norwich, I think, to probably control the ball in better areas than they did against West Brom, and also to maybe force the issue a little bit in front of 1,700 supporters who are going to be making the long trip up to the northwest, as we know all too well. And that's particularly impressive when you consider, obviously, the rail strikes this weekend and all of the circumstances around it. So it's going to be a good weekend, I think. I'm not entirely sure what we're going to get in terms of football match or end result. But I think Blackpool will represent a sterner test than maybe some people will think if they just cast their eyes towards the league table.
Yeah, my only trip to Blackpool was about a decade ago, and I remember our car got stuck in the mud. It was around about October time, so not particularly favourable memories from Blackpool. I do remember going, just to warn you, I did go in the club shop there at that time, and I spoke to the sort of staff workers about where's Houlihan. It was sort of about 2010, so Houlihan had just left Blackpool for Norwich. So good memories on that regard, but yeah, not so good memories in general from Blackpool. So for saying on Blackpool, they're a team that like to play sort of the 3/5 at the back system. In terms of how Norwich approached that one, Connor, we know that they've maybe struggled a little bit, dominated possession against those sort of teams that set up in that manner, but sometimes been a little bit ineffective in terms of creation. I mean, just picking out sort of certain players. Todd Cantwell yet to register a goal or an assist so far this season. You got to feel that maybe Onel Hernandez has looked more productive off the bench than from the start. So how does Dean Smith approach this one in terms of a setup, and who do you maybe expect to be in that sort of free behind Pukki for this game if he sort of operates for the 4-2-3-1 sort of system?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I think by his own admission, the West Brom game plan didn't quite go how he would have expected. And then obviously you've got players who are coming back from internationals as well. You'll have to forgive me because I completely switched off. So I don't even know where USA were playing. Were they Europe based or were they North America based?
Yeah, they played in Germany against Japan. They played Saudi Arabia, but I can't remember where that one was. But yeah, it was European based.
And Nunez was European based as well. So I guess there's at least you haven't got the element of players coming back from different continents and maybe that element to it and the fatigue and travel and stuff that can catch up with them. So yeah, I would foresee Sargent on the right. I could see Ramsey back in the 10 with possibly, who do you put on the left? Cantwell maybe. Because I don't think Sarah did enough probably to push his cause for another start. So I could see him dropping back to the bench and him maybe reverting to what we saw against Bristol City and that kind of setup with Nunez and McLean or unless he shifted it completely, depending on Liam Gibbs' fitness as well. But I get the sense if Liam Gibbs is only training today, Saturday might come a bit too early for a start for him. So that's kind of what I could see him doing, reverting to what they did against Bristol City. And that would probably mean ultimately Gabriel Sara drops to the bench. I guess Hernandez, you could be one you could throw in there as well. But I think the view is that he seems to be a better finisher of games and to bring on between kind of the 60 minutes and 90-minute mark. And he seems to have a better impact that way. So, yeah, that's what I could foresee at this moment in time. Obviously, we could turn up and no doubt they'll train tomorrow. There could be injuries that we don't know about. There could be other situations around returning from internationals that we don't know about. But I think if I'm Dean Smith, you probably go back to the one that won you the game before the West Brom game, and that seemed to be where maybe his head was at. And to be fair, I don't think that speaking to him today about West Brom, the West Brom game, I think he was probably pleased that Norwich had a lot of the ball. I just don't think he was particularly pleased with the areas that they had it in. So whether that is a tactical change or a personnel change, I'm not quite sure. For me, it just feels like almost giving players different instructions at different points. So that's kind of how I foresee him setting up. What about you? How do you see him going? Because it is an interesting one. He's got so many players to fit into very few positions at this moment in time. I guess the fact they've got so many games in October is going to give him an opportunity to rotate his squad quite a lot.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably where he's going to have to go with this. I mean, he sort of had that line this morning, there's 8 games in October, although his analyst told him there was 9. And yeah, you got to feel that the likes of Dowell maybe is going to get his opportunities in this run. He's a man who's maybe not kicked on completely this season, sort of seen glimmers of it, but in all, compared to maybe that sort of latter stages of the last, championship season where he scored a few really nice goals and some free kicks and really looked like an influential creator, maybe not really reached those levels so far this season, but potentially I could see him being chucked in for this one. I think you've got to get that service through to Pukki. He's a man who's, just sort of more recently in the recent games, we started to see him be sort of provided with that service, but in those sort of first maybe 8 games of the season, maybe didn't have that, and that's why his goal scoring didn't really kick on. And that was kind of the point I wanted to go to next, kind of just on Teemu Pukki. I mean, we all sort of got the opportunity to speak to Robert Fleck last weekend at the Dementia game, and he's obviously the record that Pukki's now chasing, just 3 goals behind him. So what sort of opportunity is that for Pukki now to reach potentially, well, Ewan Roberts is the one above that. So how far can he go, especially sort of against teams like Blackpool, where you maybe think he's going to get opportunities?
Yeah, well, I think he'll surpass both of them, to be honest. I've just got a feeling that he's going to get to the 100 mark, which would be unbelievable, really. And then to kind of put that maybe in more context, obviously with the contractual situation, if that was the end and it culminated in a promotion back to the Premier League and Teemu Pukki becoming only the 3rd player ever to score a century of goals for Norwich City, how could anyone excuse him, riding off to the sunset under those conditions? So for me, I think even though, and he's quite difficult to interview because it feels like he breaks a record every week, and maybe this is a part of it, but you kind of put a question to him, wanting him to praise himself a little bit and wanting him to, I'm delighted I've hit this. And a lot of the time, he's just very modest, very calm. He's kind of the same player off the pitch as the one you see on the pitch. Very composed, very willing to not really take the headlines, to kind of push the praise onto other people. So I don't know how conscious it is in his mind, in truth. I think he knows that it's there. He knows it's one to kind of keep in his mind. But I don't think it's one that he keeps himself up at night thinking about surpassing or hitting, which is probably in contrast with perhaps some strikers who are very obsessed with how many goals they get. I remember hearing an anecdote about Kevin Phillips a few years ago, who played for Sunderland, and I think it was a playoff semi-final or a game of some significance, and they'd won the game 1-0, and whoever the player was that was telling the anecdote, it might have been Niall Quinn, said that they went into the dressing room after the game, and he was almost like crestfallen that they won 1-0, and they kind of said, what's up, Kev? What's wrong? And he said, well, I didn't score. So some strikers are like that. I don't think Teemu Pukki fits into that mold. I think he's probably more selfless. He's someone willing to sacrifice his goal return for the team, and I think he's probably a little bit glad that Josh Sargent is chipping in as well, because that's something that he's not had. That burden eased off him slightly. So yeah, I think we'll see him surpass both of them this year, providing he keeps himself fit. And games like this, home games at Carrow Road, a fantastic opportunity. Being in this division generally for him, to be honest, is a fantastic opportunity for him to rack up the goals. Although I'm sure, as Robert Fleck was keen to point out to you and Sam, most of his goals came in the first division. So then we get into a discussion about how we rank the goals, but hitting 100 for me would be the major achievement, and is also very achievable, which in itself is probably a success, considering obviously, and we've repeated it numerous times, A, where he came from, and B, the figure or lack of figure that Norwich City paid for him.
Exactly that. We'll be live for about another 10 minutes. So if you've got any sort of last comments or your score predictions for the game, get them down in the comment section below, whatever platform you're watching it on. We'll just go into the comments. Michael on YouTube saying, can we get some more financial backing from our fellow Canary, Liz Truss? I mean, Connor, if you had about £2,000, how would you spend it in the club shop?
I'm not sure I would spend it at the moment, to be honest. Looking at the way it's all going, I'm not sure. How would I spend it in the club shop? I haven't ventured into the club shop, to be honest. Last time I went in there was to buy a football, not for me, and it was quite hefty in terms of price. So I could see how you could rack up that amount of money on shirts and scarves and whatnot. To be honest, I completely zoned out of Twitter and my phone generally in news, and came back, and that was the first thing I saw when I came back, and I was very, very confused about the context and why it happened. And then obviously my mind caught up, and I realised the links to Liz Truss, and it soon made sense. But yeah, I'd love to know the detail and see the receipt of what exactly was purchased. I did see someone suggest that one of those, because it was 2 purchases, wasn't it, for a few £100s, and one of them was around a season ticket renewal, which in itself probably raises questions, given it was taxpayers' money. But again, we don't need to go down that path. I'm not sure how it's possible. What would you spend? There's a gnome. You can buy a gnome. Maybe I'll get a Norwich City gnome. I don't know.
I feel like probably hospitality is where I'd go. You know, we love our food on our away games, so I feel like maybe we all have a weekend off, go and watch the game, and get a box between us. I'm sure Paddy would definitely be down for that one. He's a man that likes his belly, so I think that's probably the best way to spend it, to be honest, because I don't know what else I'd spend it on. Used to be a man for replica shirts, but these days when there's no Ricky Van Wolfswinkel, I mean, I could understand it then. That you could spend £2,000 to get his name on the back of the shirt. So,
well, to be fair, if you got Omar Bamadeli on the back of your shirt, that's a fair whack, isn't it? So maybe she's just getting shirts, but all of the long names. What was the whole? Was it Jan Venegor of Hesselink? Maybe she's getting that on the back of the shirt or something. But if she's getting Trust 10 on the back, then I'm not quite sure how she's managed to get a nearly £2,000 bill from that. I'm not sure people. Well, actually, funny enough, Delia Smith was on Robert Peston's show last night, bizarrely, and was asked the question of kind of what she spends it on. I don't think even she knew. So that probably says that maybe they're a bit perplexed even when that story emerged.
You certainly can't spend £2,000 on getting Sarah on the back of your shirt. But Joseph Bridgewood is asking, what do we think of Sarah? He went to the West Brom game and thought he had plenty of opportunities to cross the ball, and he didn't. So a man that's obviously still adapting from playing in Brazil, the different sort of climate and the different culture, but maybe not kind of hit the heights that some fans expected when he was at Nantes, sort of like, I don't know, maybe the sort of Jolis sort of kind of signing, the hype around it, but not really hit those heights so far, but also a man that's obviously coming back from an injury. So what have you thought of him so far this season, Connor?
Yeah, really, really interesting, and really interesting, I think, some of the discourse around him, because I don't think he's been helped by a few things. First and foremost, the price tag, because even though it probably wasn't some of the figures that are out there at this moment in time, at least it isn't yet, that is the one that people look at. And so there's a degree of expectation that comes with that, particularly when Norwich City spend or sign a player with a deal that could get structured up to that. We saw that last season in terms of the expectation that creates. Secondly, I don't think how quickly Marcelino Nunez has adapted has helped him, because you kind of look at it, two players from the same part of the world, similar backgrounds, similar cultures in terms of South American based, but have adapted to English football very differently. And like you say, there's a reason that Sarah has probably been a sort of dipped in slower because of the fitness issues. And obviously adapting culturally takes time, I think, for any individual. So I think what we're seeing at the moment is probably one South American who has just gone, yeah, I'm fine with this. I'm fine with great pitches. And even he, I think, in terms of how good he's looked, I'm still not seeing a player that I feel has completely adapted to Championship football. I think we've still seen moments where he gets caught on the ball, or he makes the wrong choice, or he gets closed down perhaps a little bit quicker than he's expected. So I don't think we're talking about Marcelino Nunez as completely polished, but I think you look at probably their timelines on how they've adapted, and Nunez feels quite a far away from Sarah. So I don't think that's helped him. And then obviously you've got the fitness element as well. And he's obviously coming back, and he's not really played much football since the start of the year. I think it was April that he got his ankle injury. He's had an op on that. He came back a little bit quicker than expected. Again, that creates probably a lack of patience around then getting him involved. And it takes time for players to get back to full fitness. And we got to a stage where he deserved that start against West Brom, I thought, because the cameos that he was producing were kind of, if you layered them, they were getting better every time. It felt like a very difficult game to drop him into. He was playing against Jake Livermore. He was playing against Jason Malumbi. He was playing against a West Brom team that was just very compact and said, right, okay, you're not gonna play through us. You have to play around us. Very difficult, I think, for any number 10. I think if you'd have put Aaron Ramsey in that situation, I think he'd have had a similar afternoon to Gabriel Sara. So I don't think that game was necessarily his fault. I think he was probably nullified as a result of what West Brom did. So all of those factors have made it very difficult. But that being said, I think he did find it very tough against West Brom. And there were a couple of moments and a couple of things that just didn't work for him, beyond obviously the volley, the Van Basten-esque volley that hit the bar. It was quite a tough afternoon. So I think what we'll probably see is him return to the bench and probably go back to almost take a step back again. And now the onus will be, right, can you come on and affect games off the bench? Can you almost do what Onel Hernandez is doing? Can you come on and finish strongly? And maybe then forge a role for yourself that way. But it's a setback for him, because that was probably his first real opportunity, if we're describing it like that. The first time he's got ahead of players. But I think, again, he's one that Norwich City clearly are going to be patient on because of all of those mitigating factors around it. I think he's got enough mitigation at the moment that we can probably attribute that performance to other factors, as I have just done. The problem is the next time an opportunity comes up, he will then know what it is. He will then know what the Championship is like. He will then know what he needs to do and what went wrong in that West Brom game. So there's going to be less of that mitigating factors. But I actually don't mind how Dean Smith has managed him so far. I think it's probably natural. I mean, Emi Buendia didn't get 90 minutes in his belt for Norwich City until October, November time in the first season under Daniel Farke. So some players can come in and be like Marcelino Nunez, water off a duck's back, doesn't affect them. I think all of the various elements around Gabriel Sara's signing probably has made it a little bit more difficult for him to do that. There was probably no expectation around Nunez. Bit of a free hit maybe for both parties in terms of that regard. Sara doesn't, but by the same token, we do need to start seeing stuff from Gabriel Sara at some point, and we need to see those cameos converted into starts because Norwich City signed him as someone who would be able to affect their position in the Premier League. He arrived to play in the Premier League, and at the moment, both of those things we're probably not seeing. So I'm not concerned at this point about his impact long term. Just be nice to see him go back to what he was, which is really good cameos off the bench and then forging another opportunity for himself. That's the only thing he can do now, I think.
Norwich City's chances of getting back to the Premier League will be boosted with a win this weekend. Connor's a few score predictions coming in already. Stephen is saying a 2-0 Norwich City win. He's also from Virginia and waiting Hurricane Ian tomorrow. I've seen a 4-0 from Joseph as well. So, Connor, I'm going to throw it over to you. I mean, Sam and me have been joking because I think I've got about the last 4 of these predictions right. So I might soon set up like a payment sort of, opportunity there. People can pay me and I can give you the score prediction and you can all go and place a bet. Not that we, by any means condone betting, but that's an opportunity that, I might have to do. So I think I've got the 3-2 Bristol City correct, which I was pretty proud of that one. And 1-1 against West Brom. So over to you, Connor. What's the score going to be and how do you see this one going? We might have lost Connor. I think we might have lost Connor. I'll try my best to get him back. On that note, I'll give my score prediction. I'm going to go 3-1 Norwich, I think, for this one. I can see it being a really tight game initially in the first half, but I think the quality that Norwich have got, particularly in those sort of second half, I think will be enough to see off Blackpool. So, I'm going to go 3-1. I think Timu Pukki, Josh Sargent, and let's go for a Nunez goal. I can see that being the score on Saturday. If you're travelling up to Blackpool, have a safe trip up. I mean, it's quite a long journey. No trains as well this weekend, which isn't exactly ideal. But, if you've got your bucket and spade, go down to the front. I know Connor's not a massive fan of heights, so he's not going to be going up the Blackpool Tower. But if you're there for the weekend, then that seems like a good place to go. If you are a Pinker Plus subscriber, you can go and watch my interview with Lee Charles, a Blackpool fan. He gives all the insight you're going to need on Blackpool, so that's well worth a watch. We also obviously spoke to Dean Smith this morning, so you've got the press conference video up on our YouTube channel at the moment. Connor is back. Let me see if he can add him back to the stream. There we go, Connor, you're back. I sort of gave a 3-1 prediction there, so go on, put yours in.
That's the lengths I go to avoid giving a score prediction. I don't know. Is the honest answer. I've got in my head a really mad kind of 3-3, but I don't know if that's just because I'm not seeing for a game for a while. I'm a little bit delirious. I'm gonna try and be confident. I think hopefully this is the weekend that we see Norwich City really make a statement. I'd go with you actually. I think I could see a 3-1. I think that would be a really good way to start what is a very difficult month, but also what I think is going to be quite a revealing month because Norwich have Watford, Sheffield United, Burnley, all in the set. That's an incredible set of fixtures, I think, and we're going to learn a lot more about Norwich City regardless. So let's start the month on a positive trajectory, and let's say 3 points in the Northwest. But there's something nagging away, and I'll keep it in the back of my head. But it's just there going, this game's going to be a little bit bonkers. But I'm going to go for a 3-1 Norwich win as well. Boring.
I was just saying there before you came back, there's lots of opportunities to explore Blackpool. You've got the waxworks, you've got the beach, but they've also got the tower, Connor. And I was saying you're not a massive fan of heights, so we expect to see you up the tower this weekend.
Not a chance. To be honest, I'm sat in our office. We're on the second floor, and I don't want to get too close to that window there because I'm a little bit fearful that I'll start freaking out. So, no, absolutely no chance of getting me near the tower. If my feet are off the floor, I'm not a happy bunny. So, I think Bloomfield Road and the press box will be be enough. Well, I think it's fair to say, though, I think the press box is, unless I'm wrong, but last time I checked, I think it's situated literally in the middle of the away end. So we could be in for quite an interesting afternoon.
That could be a very fun afternoon if Norwich City can get a 3-1 win. So with that, we'll round off the show. As I just kind of said, we've got the Terrace Talk video up on our Pink and Plus channel at the moment. So if you want to get all the Blackpool insight, then that's the place to go. We all spoke to Dean Smith this morning. So you've got the press conference video up, and all the team news is across our channels at the moment as well. And obviously we'll all be at Blackpool on Saturday. We're travelling up tomorrow. We get a lovely night in Blackburn, which is also the perks of our job as well. So yeah, we'll all be at, all your usual match build up, all your usual match analysis, and reaction will be across our channel. So keep it locked on the Pink and the Pink and Plus app. If you're traveling up to Blackpool, as I said, safe journey, no trains this weekend. So massive pat on the back if you're making that long journey, and hopefully you can be rewarded with another 3 points in Norwich and keep this unbeaten run continued. So with that, we'll round off the show. Enjoy your weekend that's now coming. Obviously, as I said, we'll be at Blackpool, so hopefully it's not raining. I think that's probably the typical October weather in Blackpool. So, yeah, get your coats as well. Thanks for joining us this Thursday. You think it's Friday? Safe travels, and thanks for joining us.